Hi class. Today I'm going to give you a short video on the Costello Pasta assignment. You may notice that the Costello Pasta assignment is actually split into two different modules, um, but then depending on the semester they're either due at the same time or directly after each other by just a day or two. And I just split it into two so that you can focus on form submission first and then validation second. But if you prefer, you can just do all this assignment together and complete it and then submit both parts uh, in. You can complete the entire assignment and if you like and submit it here and submit it here as well, or you can submit it in parts, doing the first part first and the second part second. Uh, in this video, in order partly as in trying to keep my videos a little shorter here, I'm only going to focus on the more critical things and the parts of the assignment that are hardest for students to understand. The rest you should be able to figure out based on all the other background written information that I give you along with all these little exercises. But the hardest thing for students sometimes is learning to figure out how to prevent a form from submitting and also looping through a set of radio buttons to see which one is checked. Now the reason that this second one is hard to do is that you actually have to start working with arrays now, and I'll show you in a second how that works. But let's first then, let me show you a simple form which I have here. And we have a form that's submitting to the same web address actually that you're going to be submitting to, along with a post method. And then there are two radio buttons, lime and lemon. There's a hidden field here. I don't really need it. But let's just submit this form right now. And you can see that what happens is with the hidden field, the hidden field is the server is looking for this and returning to me, so we could change this, say, to Joe if we wanted to. And now if we submit it again, you'll see that Joe comes up here. If you come from 1400, these names haven't meant much to you because they don't actually affect the presentation or the way the form actually looks on screen. But it's very important that you pay attention to these names when you actually do this assignment, because the server is going to be looking for particular names, or at least for this client name it's going to be looking for. All right. So the first challenge you're going to face is that you're not going to want to submit the form right away. You're going to want to evaluate what has been filled out in the form before actually sending it to the server. So the way you do that is by adding this extra attribute to the form called onSubmit equals, and this is where you can call a method client side. Oftentimes it will be called validate. And now, if we run our JavaScript, we can make this validate function, or you could call it process form too. Now, if we run this form again, we get a debug, and then the form is submitting. So you can see that on submit, it actually executes the validate function. But then it goes ahead and submits the form. So there are occasions when you're going to want to submit the form and sometimes when you're not. So return false will prevent the form from submitting as long as you also make sure, and this is just standard, let's put that on submit here. You need a return right here as well. Okay, so now return false, clear it, set everything up again, and it's still submitting. So let's see what's going on. probably the form needs to be, or JSBin needs to be refreshed. Let's do it again. And now you get the debug up here, and it's returning false, and the form isn't submitting. If we change this to true, however, and submit the form, now it will submit. Okay, so that's the key, is that you have your on submit event. So when this form is submitted, it then executes your function, and if it returns true, the form submits, but if it returns false, it doesn't. And make sure always to include this in your in the value of the event, because if you don't, the form just always submits. Now the next trick is that I want to show you how you can work now with collections of elements like radio buttons, as opposed to single inputs like this, because you already know how to extract information from this real easy. We could put an ID in here. We just call it client, yeah, and then up here we could put in a document get element by ID. We'll do that right now. Let me just type it out to save us. Okay, so here I've typed out a console log document get element by ID client value, which should output to the console the value of Joe, which is in our input field here. Yeah, let's run it and make sure it works. And we're getting an error. So if we submit the form, I've fixed the error. It was just another JSBin thing. If I submit the form, Joe is outputted to the console. So this is a DOM access method you're already very familiar with, but what you're not familiar with is how you can access these particular types, where we're not actually adding ID. All we're working with is name. And the way you do that is by using, I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need it anymore, is you use another document method, document get elements by name. Okay, and then the name here is, it's not radio, it's, I've called it fruit. Okay, fruit, and let's return that to a variable. We'll call it radios. Okay. Okay. Radio buttons. All right. So, and let's actually output this to screen. And let's run it. And you can see when you run it and you output radio buttons, you get this big long honkin' object node list. Okay, so it's actually returning the collection of nodes or elements, which in this case is your two radio buttons. And the reason it's outputting all this stuff is it's outputting all of its attributes, which are very many. But you should just think of it as a collection of these two elements, these two radios. And it's a little more complex dealing with this because it's no longer a single element. It's a collection of elements. And the way we deal with this is by treating them as if it were an array. So the radio buttons are effectively an array of elements. And in the actual course module, I've given you some references in the textbook where you can read up on how to work with JavaScript arrays. Let's see where they are. They're here in the textbook. If you click on textbook and then scroll down to the Costello's Pasta, arrays and array iteration. Um, so let's go back to our collection of radio buttons, and let's get rid of the console for right now. Uh, so as W3 schools will describe to you, you can iterate through an array using a for loop. So in this case, for we're just using a simple counter here, x equals 0, and then x is less than the radio buttons dot length, okay, so less than the length of the array, okay, and then we're just incrementing like so. Again, so radio buttons is an array, and we're going to iterate through the array until we're just we don't want to go past the array length, so that's why we're allowing the counter to go up just to one less than the array length. So how then we do access the how would we access the value? Well, we can access the value of a radio button that's been checked by going radio buttons, and this is x like so, and so this is like an index, right? As we're going through the array, this would be, and we're at, say we're at 0, this would be, you know, array 0 or 1, okay? And then the value. And let's just see how this works now. Again, we're going to run the console. And it's saying radio buttons is not defined. Radio, because I had not pluralized it, so it has to be radio buttons. Let's try running it again. We're getting an error here. I'm going to solve this in the background. Okay, we're ready to run this. Let's get rid of this particular console because it outputs so much, that statement, because it was returning so much stuff. Now, when we hit it, we can see what's going on is we're going through the for loop, going through an array of the collection of radio button elements, and then we're outputting the value, okay? So one thing that's also worth elaborating on a little bit more, again, radio, so this syntax right here, right? This is basically saying reference the array and then the particular index in the array. So, you know, as we're going through the for loop, the index increases, so you get each of the values. Here we got lime and lemon, but if we just stuck in 0 here and ran through the for loop, notice how it will now just say lime twice. So we have 0 here. If we run it again and submit, we get lime, lime twice. If we put in 1 and save it and run it again, we'll get lemon, lemon twice. I don't know why we keep getting these darn validations. Lemon, lemon twice. But that's why we use the X here as the counter. Then it goes through, it works as an index or counter and goes through the array little by little. Now we can also output whether one of them has been checked or not by, I'm just going to copy this. Checked, like so. And if we clear this and save it again, and most likely it'll always seems to get always hits an error for some reason. It seems to have to refresh it more than once. So now we're getting it to, it's going through the array, lime, and it outputs lime. It outputs false because it hasn't been checked. It outputs lemon. It outputs false because lemon hasn't been checked either. But now if we run it again and we click say lemon and submit, now we get lime false, lemon true. Okay, so this is the in a very simple way, this is the way that you can iterate through your collection of radio buttons or your collection of checkboxes for that matter, and access the values in the element, as well as to see whether they're checked or not. So we could very easily add a validation here. You're going to want to do something similar. Um, we can do that by, say, adding a, let's clear some stuff out here, by adding a say a valid flag here. And then going, and then we can add so this property is always a Boolean, so we're just going to evaluate to see whether it's true or not. True. And if it is, then we can say the flag is true. And then after the for loop finishes executing, then we can put in a set of conditionals. Rather than typing this out, I'm just going to copy and paste it in. So if the valid flag is true, then we return true, meaning we allow this form to submit. Otherwise, we don't let this form submit. And I'm just also putting up an alert here to alert the user to click the radio button. In your cases, instead of putting up alerts, you're going to have to actually put messages back in the form rather than alert, because an alert is a rather primitive way of doing it. So let's see if we can get this to run now. And so if we click submit now, we should get the alert comes up and the form doesn't submit. However, if we click say lime and click submit, now the form submits. Okay, thanks for watching.